November 18th, 2013. We're here for the purposes of the Committee of the Whole. I would ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
Before the First Amendment again. What?
Go ahead and call the roll.
Okay. Gutenkopf.
Here.
Deuter.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Holumsky.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Healy absent. Honquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner is absent. 12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent. We have a quorum. Public comments, agenda item number 2. Clerk Spencer, has anybody signed up for public comments this evening?
No one signed up for public comments this evening.
Is there anybody in the audience who did not have an opportunity to sign up on our sign-in sheet that would like to make a public comment this evening?
Okay.
Mr. Pagash, please approach the microphone. You have 3 minutes.
Claude Pagage, 566 West Gladys. We've been having commentary about the budget that the city has worked diligently to hold it as tight as they could, and not a dollar is being wasted. Well, we had 3 people on development and communication. We spent about $500,000 on them, and now it looks like the city's up and decided they weren't doing much because we're going to spend $75,000 for a new development and communication. And we don't know what we're going to do with the other 3, but we're going to keep them on the payroll anyway. Interesting, isn't it, how we save money? And then we have this little issue about Spring Road. There's a need at the Prairie Path to put in a tunnel, but it doesn't necessarily, we don't need a tunnel at Spring Road. And we have a Public Safeties Committee. They haven't said a word about it. So I assume the public hasn't come to them. But they're throwing up stop signs and yield signs all over the place like they're planting flowers. So maybe now that a request has been made that the public safety take a look at York and the Prairie Path, maybe we can save ourselves $3,900,000 and just take $100,000 and put up a couple stop signs? $3 million would be nice. I'm in the money. Yes, indeed, it would be nice. And then we have the court system. I can pay my traffic tickets there. The amazing thing is, nobody knows what it costs to run it. Doesn't even know if it makes money. But the people like to go there, so they don't have to go down to DuPage County Courthouse. How can you be happy about going somewhere when you don't know what it costs? Amazing, totally amazing. Oh yeah, and last but not least, once you know it this year, we got to spend $2 million for communications. New computers, new phones. I understand you guys were using I don't know what you were using. Because I talked to a lot of people, they call City Hall and they can't get a hold of anybody. And when they do get a hold of anybody, they can't get anything done. So I don't know if these phones are going to be well worthwhile. And then on top of it, you got to set up all new programs. It was bad enough they were having a hard time running the computers they had. Now they're going to have new computers, new programs, and they're really going to be lost. So, considering all the money you saved, maybe you ought to consider saving a little of this money that you're spending. Because why would I want to spend $150,000 to design a tunnel that a couple of stop signs would serve just as good a purpose? Thank you, Mayor.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like the opportunity to speak this evening before we get started? Seeing none, we'll move on. Business for the committee. As council's aware, we are trying to get through this budget. We have 9 items I'm hoping to get through tonight with the help of city staff and keep on our schedule as noted previously with a circle back on December 2nd. City Manager Grabowski, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We are going to lead off tonight with the Capital Improvement Fund, which is pages 170 to 173 in the budget book. If you recall, back in July, we presented the preliminary 5-year capital expenditure budget. What this is a refined version for the 2014 fiscal year. So with that, we would just open it up to questions from the council.
Any questions with regard to the capital improvement fund? No questions? All right, City Manager Grabowski, motor fuel tax.
Thank you. We'll move on to MFT, which is pages 196 through 201. This is a pretty standard program from year to year. It goes towards different programs that the city uses, some road funding, some operations, very restricted by state statute. So if there's any questions on the motor fuel tax, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions as it relates to the motor fuel tax fund? Any questions? Alderman Levin.
Can you explain in the line, I don't know what it is, 0400, the revenues, they're going up from estimated 924,000 this year, which would be $1.4 million, then they go down to $1.2 million, then they go further. I just not sure what the basis for the projection is. What page?
In 2011,
Page
198.
198, 04-00. Sorry, Marilyn.
in 2011, the city was the recipient of an Illinois Capital Bill grant. And that was a grant that was paid out over 5 years, about $188,000 a year. The 5th year is 2014. So in 2015, that explains the decrease. That 188,000 distribution, annual distribution, will be going away in that year. And I suspect those dollars, if we looked out another couple of years, that revenue line would somewhat even out.
Thank you.
That, I'd like to make a follow-up comment on Alderman Levin's question, because it leads to, given the amount of money we have in the motor fuel tax fund, we allocate expenses from the general fund to that fund. And because we had this capital grant, 188,000 more a year, that's when we started moving snow-related expenses to that fund. When that 188,000 goes away, that means expenses are going to have to come out of motor fuel tax and go back into the general fund. You don't see that in 2015, but when we present a 2016 budget, you will see dollars moved out of motor fuel tax back to the general fund.
Okay. Any additional questions? Alderman Brand.
Thank you. The only question I have would be, I do understand for some of the areas of the budget, we pay salaries out of this fund. Are we paying a percentage of each of these areas, being streets and, I think streets and, what's the other one? That's it? Or are we paying certain number of employees? What's the percentage base that we can afford to pay from the MFT? On electrical.
We have to follow the guidelines of the MFT rules. So 100% of the salaries aren't allocated to MFTs. So as an example, I'm not sure what one was electrical. I think we allocate 87% of their salaries and then 12% to the general fund. So, but again, it's based on how much revenue is available in the MFT fund, as Finance Director Gaston pointed out. And in that 2016 year, we'll have to adjust some of those salaries back and stuff. And we do it for ease of reporting. We do allocate the salt purchase, no salaries over time, but just salt.
Is the range normally or typically for salaries, typically in the 80% realm?
I'm not sure what the other, but it's based on their duties and what they do to make sure it follows the MFT guidelines.
All right, thank you.
Very good. Any additional questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. Next on the list is the parking system, pages 226 to 233. Again, if you have questions on that, we're happy to answer.
Any questions as it relates to the parking system revenue fund? Alderman Levin.
On page 227, the capital outlay under expenditures is $10 million. That, I assume, that's the parking deck on Addison. Is that, have we budgeted for a certain number of floors, 4 or 6 on that?
That was the 4-story garage.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Alderman Deuter.
You know, I do just want to, I guess, ask a question or just maybe point out a couple things in this fund. I think this is a really important fund to look at because it is an area that we know is going to see a tremendous increase over the next year. Even at 45 feet, it's going to see a tremendous increase, and that's what we see now. And it's not just, I guess I want to just point out, you know, where we should anticipate seeing the increases is not just in the capital outlay, but one of the items that's in this budget now is for repairs and maintenance. And I think, you know, that's another chunk. I think this year round I think it's about 140,000 for maintenance to the large deck, which is not that old. So about 3 years down the road, we again will need to be thinking about the maintenance costs for the new garage. And the maintenance, if Director Gaston and I talked a little bit about this, and I just want to make sure I understand, the way we budget the maintenance now is just kind of a rolling, we rotate through. I think we're budgeting about 140,000 for whichever deck is up in the kind of 3-year cycle. So I'm just, thank you.
Alderman Gudenkauf.
Parking deck maintenance just sort of triggered something for me because one of the questions I have that relates to the Han Street project is going to involve the public parking and whether or not there's any city contribution. Has the budget started to anticipate any city contribution to the public parking in the Han Street project, or is that too far off in the future for us to be thinking about now?
Okay. Alderman Deuter.
Just one more question on the debt service line, again on page 227. The increase, I think, what's been a little bit less than 200,000 a year. Next year we had proposed that going up to 750,000, and then in 2015 it goes up to $1 million. Are there other bonds that are kind of coming up during this time, or does that increase, is that largely or entirely attributable to Addison?
What debt service? What page are you in, Marty?
227.
Yes, the
Debt service line.
the major impact on that line is the debt for the Addison deck.
Okay.
The only thing that would go up is if there would need to be, you know, additional funds, if it was a different size deck or something changed.
Okay.
Alderman Dunn.
With the construction of the Addison parking garage, when do we think we'd start seeing increased revenues as a result of that? I'm not really seeing them in 2014 or 2015. Is there an expectation for that?
The way that the garage is planned right now, it would be shopper parking. It is not anticipated to be a commuter deck.
No revenue.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. Next on the list are the TIF funds. Starting on page 234. We did briefly mention those in the KEB discussion. Budget provides for some land acquisition improvements in the Lake Street Development Project area, as well as ongoing streetscape improvements in the Central Business District, or TIF 1. Funding for the facade renovation program in TIF 1 is also included, in addition to some roadway improvements for the fiscal year. Those are all from TIF 1. Otherwise, we would answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions regarding TIF funds?
If I may, Director Gaston has.
I'm sorry, I have a comment, but I think it's important to point out on page 240, under other expenses, the line 6098, you will see there's nothing, and then there's 2014 projected 190,000, and then the next year out about 1.8 million. That's the first surplus distribution pursuant to the 2004 intergovernmental agreement with the school district. So we are now at the point where the sales tax TIF has been completed. So we're at the point where now we can make those distributions. So we're anticipating a small one in 2014 and then obviously a much larger one in 2015. I think that's important with our obligation to the school district.
I think it's a great point, Ms. Gaston. I know in talking to their Director of Finance, that was not in their anticipated funding, so I don't, that'll be good for them. How many years does that go? And what, I don't have that, you know, that chart that Tom pulled together that extrapolates out. What's our estimate right now that that sales tax overlay TIF is expiring? What's our estimate on distribution just for the schools?
Currently, we only worked through this budget year. We haven't updated the long-term projections to provide to the school district. I know they've asked for it. I know the Park District is, so we're in the process of updating those long-term projections.
Okay. I know we had a chart that was up to date when we were going through the discussions regarding establishing TIF 4. I think it's important that we keep that up to date and circulate that. Alderman Gutenkopf.
So the biggest upcoming expense out of TIF 1 is going to be the distribution to the school district, but the fund balance is still pretty healthy. What are the other projected expenses for that fund balance for the remainder of that TIF? Since we've gotten a pretty clear message that the TIF isn't going to be around long enough to develop any big projects. And since we're going to float a bond to build a parking deck within that TIF.
We have issued debt for TIF 1, and that's the largest expense that we have going forward and stuff. So once we hit that point, most of our revenues will be just declared as surplus to all the taxing bodies, but the fund balance that we've built up would pay for the future debt service to the end of the TIF.
So the roughly $3 million fund balance at the end of 2014 and 2015 is mostly going to be dedicated toward debt.
Yeah, there are some expenses. We still have maintenance of streetscape allocated, and next year we have the roadway projects and stuff, but a majority of it, I believe, is the debt service.
Thank you.
Alderman Bram.
Alderman Gutenkopf asked one of my questions. What is the end date of each of the TIFs? I think TIF 1 is 2015, or is it a little further out than that? TIF 1.
2021 is the end of TIF 1.
2021.
2021.
TIF 2 is 2016. TIF 3 is 2019.
Thank you. A substantive question on the actual TIF funds on page 254, just to get additional clarification. Estimated for 2013 capital on TIF 4 is almost 2.4 million. I remember the $1.25 million for the Mariano's location. What were the other expenses for that TIF? And then I believe the 2014 proposed for capital is 50% of that 1.25 to Mariano's?
That number, the 2.4 million is made up of two items. The first half of the incentive for Mariano's, 625,000, and the purchase of the gas station property that we just purchased, the 1.77 million.
Thank you.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
I have a question about I always get the TIF numbers messed up. TIF 3 at Route 83. As we all know, Dominic's is moving out. Do you have a sense of what percentage of the revenue in that TIF is generated by that property?
Are you speaking specifically to the Dominic store or the shopping center?
The Dominic store.
I don't
in
know
that
that we
property.
have that breakout. I think it's under one pin, two pins, Tom tells me, so we don't have the breakout specifically for that store on hand.
I mean, we all hope, of course, that something is going to move in there. What impact do you think this is going to have on any future ability of this TIF to do whatever it needs to do yet? I mean, do we have most of the cash already in hand for what we're going to need in this TIF? Is this,
Well, as you said, certainly we hope a tenant moves in there quickly. Obviously, they're still responsible for the property taxes as we move along. If it's vacant for some period of time, they'll be able to request a reduction in their taxes based on that. But I can't speak to how that would affect, because I don't know specifically how much the Dominic's pays as a percentage of that, that shopping center.
thank you.
Any other questions on TIFs?
Are we doing?
Alderman
We're doing
Webb.
all the TIFs at once?
Yes.
All right. If I could ask a question about TIF 4 on page 255, actually two questions. The first one, I just want to see if there's, is there a project in mind for these letters of credit in bond proceeds 392?
We use the line of credit to pay the Mariano's incentive and to purchase the Pauli property. So these numbers, to a certain extent, mirror the capital expenditures that we talked about.
All right, and then the other question is, does that tie in then to the capital outlay on 80-04 and 8026?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Before we move on, Marilyn, when's the yearly joint TIF review? When's that coming up? That's soon, isn't it?
Yes, that's Monday, December 9th.
Okay. Monday, December 9th. And we'll be reviewing all four TIFs, yes?
Yes, and that will be at 6 o'clock before committee meetings on December 9th.
Okay, very good. Capital projects,
That's page 257 through 264. Covers items such as stormwater, which I mentioned before. We did put $3 million in the budget in hopes that one of our projects might be able to come to fruition at the school or park district. Other than that, I would open it up for questions.
any questions? Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. I know from history that District 205 owes us $1 million from York High School's construction. Is that in this area, or where is that?
It actually is sitting in a receivable account on our balance sheet.
Okay.
So that's where it's at.
Thank you.
Alderman Bram.
Thank you. On page 262, under revenues for 2014 proposed, for stormwater fund, we're proposing $50,000, and then in 2015, another $550,000. Are these predicted projects that we would think we would be doing fee in lieu of stormwater management, or where is this large sums in the next 2 years coming from? And then where is that revenue being transferred from, that $3 million that City Manager Grabowski spoke of?
I'll speak to the $3 million. That would be a bond issue. I will ask Director Gaston to answer your first question, though.
The answer is yes. You know, there's so much not known in this area and what development is very possibly could happen. So fee in lieu of is in there. So if you wanted to see my detailed backup for that number, I don't have it, other than logically one thinks that the dollars should be there. They may or may not materialize.
The source of revenue would be only from a fee in lieu of and/or interest, right?
It could be a fee in lieu of, it could be property tax, I think that was discussed earlier. It could be numerous other revenue sources, stormwater utility management fee. So again, the revenue would need to be there to actually pay for the debt service. So. But that hasn't been decided as far as the revenue source for any capital projects that would be done.
Okay, because you just answered my follow-up, because we don't have a stormwater management fee to date.
No,
So
I'm saying
that
that
was going to be my follow-up after you mentioned that revenue
Oh.
source. Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, we'll move on.
The debt service funds on page 266, or actually the bond and interest funds, 265 to 272. This fund serves the purpose of collecting money and then dispersing it to pay our debt. You may wonder why in fiscal 2012, in 2012-13, at the end of the year, we had no fund balance. Because of the timing of the change in the year, and you can see at the end of 2013, we're estimating a fund balance. Bonds are typically paid September 1st interest, principal and interest March 1st. In our old fiscal year, everything happened within the fiscal year. You got your tax dollars in June and September, and you paid debt in September and March. At the end of the year, you had no money left because you've paid your debt. Now we're on a calendar year, and it's a different cycle. Yes, there's a September and a March 1st in that cycle too, but it's the end of one debt service cycle and the beginning of the other. So at the end of the year, there will be money sitting there designated for debt service payments that will happen March 1st of that next year. That's
Okay, any questions regarding debt service? Seeing none, we'll move on.
The trust and agency funds are funds where we account for and I'll say manage those funds, but they're not for general use by the city. For instance, the police and fire pension funds. The city does the accounting for those funds. The management of the finances in terms of investments are handled by outside, not consultants, but outside brokers, MB Financial being one, and Faldudo and Sawyer as a broker being another. But we do the accounting for them. So they're just fiduciary funds that we look after, so to speak. The same is true of, skip over The Gloss Mausoleum Fund, that's a restricted fund to be used only for the upkeep of the Gloss Mausoleum building and grounds. The one we're probably most familiar with is the Working Cash Fund. And you can see that on page 285. With one more payment, the general fund will no longer be in debt to the Working Cash Fund. The Working Cash Fund will be flush with where they should be, which is between $800,000 and $1 million. Anything over $1 million will be transferred by policy to the general fund. So you can see some small dollars out there at the end of 2014, end of 2015. Should that happen, then those dollars would be moved automatically to the general fund.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, we'll go on to our last item of the night.
The last item is general fund revenues. We explained that a little bit in the budget address, and if you have any specific questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions about fund revenues, general fund revenues? Well, I think that wraps it up for this evening. Before I ask for an adjournment, circle back a week from today. It's going to be a special, or committee of the whole after committee meetings, yes?
Pardon?
Committee of the whole after committee meetings. And staff, you'll have the circle back list ready. And then, in theory, any amendments that we make at that point, we make. And when would we formally vote to approve the budget? On the 2nd or the 9th, if you can get it done in time the 2nd? Okay.
Anticipate the 2nd.
Alderman Brand.
When will we have the list of circle back items, just to make sure that all are on that list and we're ready to discuss the same things that evening?
We're distributed.
Yes, the list, which I'll be happy to provide to you, was sent out as part of packet extras last week. And I would anticipate that this coming up week, no circle back items tonight, but we would send the same list out, but with backup to that, in terms of providing a little bit more information regarding the questions that were asked surrounding those particular circle backs. So in the Thursday packet this week, you should have a lot more information regarding those.
Great, thank you.
Alderman Hipskin.
I want to thank Marilyn and Tom for this presentation and for your extra work that you've had to put in this year for changing the calendar and fiscal year. Flawless job, and you've made it very easy for us to understand it, and you've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well said. I think you speak for all of us on that one. Yes. All right, motion to adjourn. Alderman York. Alderman Levin with a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.